Okay, well, my most recent book is called Those Left Behind. Well, there's some interesting lore, speaking of, typing it up and all of that type of stuff behind that. But the book itself is about this. This is my foray into, I guess, space westerns, because I always loved the idea of space westerns, and I thought that was really cool. And so I said, okay, this is kind of the world that I want to create. And so I created this setting, and this planet is called Quad, and it is one of, well, four now colonies in this solar system. And a few thousand years ago, the creators of these colonies, they call them the pioneers, up and disappeared after this cataclysm, like wrecked this colony Quad, and just turned it into basically like a desert wasteland that's been slowly dying ever since.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast, where we bring on amazing authors from around the world. We learn about their writing process. We honor the authors that are listening. You're going to learn something from a fellow author. We also talk to the readers to fall in love with another great author that's going to proudly be displayed on your bookshelf behind you when you fall in love with this author. Jason's here. We're going to be talking about his journey, his book. We're going to talk about typewriters, which I'm excited to talk about. Jason, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Hey, thank you, Dave, and I am excited to be here, and thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right. This is really good. Jason, tell everybody, where are you? Where do you live?
Well, I live in the high desert of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So a lot of people might be familiar with it from, Breaking Bad, or the Balloon Fiesta, maybe. But
okay. All right.
But yeah. It's where I landed. I've been here for a few years now.
Okay. So where are you from originally? Born and raised?
Well, I'm from a little further south. I was born and raised in Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh, I've heard of that place before.
Yeah.
There you go.
Most people have.
For some reason, there's something going on there.
Yeah.
Can you confirm or deny? What can you tell us?
But you know what's crazy about that is whenever I was growing up there, I mean, that was not a thing. Nobody talked about it. There was no weird UFO conventions. I mean, nothing. There, all of the UFO stuff, if you look up pictures of it now, I mean, the McDonald's is a flying saucer shape, and there's an alien waving outside of Dunkin' Donuts. And,
of course there is.
Yeah. None of that was there. It was just a normal small town, an agricultural town whenever I was growing up. And it wasn't until, the 50-year anniversary, I think 1997, that they really started trying to cash in on all of that alien hype and alien craze. And so that's whenever all of this stuff, really started gaining traction, But yeah, before then it was, I didn't even know about the Roswell incident until I was like 12 years old, and my aunt gave me a book on it for Christmas. And
okay. I have to ask this, Jason, just for the audience, because I'm sure they're wanting to know. Yeah. Are you, in fact, an alien, Jason? I just want to know, just before we get into here.
Oh, I've signed...
Confirm or deny? What would you like to say?
We have to sign NDAs before we actually move out of Roswell. And so...
There you go. All right, everybody.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Oh, all right, okay. If that's your story, you're sticking to it. Okay. Yes. All right, that's fine. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, that took a turn. I'm not really sure how I feel about this whole alien world thing. I think it's a little bit egotistical of us to think that we're the only thing in the world when you see how vast everything is, but I don't know how I feel about other people looking at us going, those earthlings look really weird,
right?
With their funny fingers and toes and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and especially if they are so advanced, they're so that they can travel galaxies and light years and stuff like that, but they're going to crash whenever they get here. Like,
they're terrible drivers, apparently, right? Is what they are.
Apparently, yeah. They're just terrible at driving. And
it seems like Earth is like a drive-through. Right. For people in the galaxies, I guess. They just kind of crash here and run out of gas or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe looking at his alien phone, whatever it was, and bam! I don't know.
The Alien Phone 14. You know, they got the
Right.
new updated version. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I like it. Okay. This is good. So I'm thinking a new book is in the works, just having this conversation.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
You're an author, and before we hit record, you mentioned that you approach your writing a little different than a lot of the people that have been on my show. I have people who write their books on their cell phone. I have people who write their books doing voice memos. I've had people take content and turn it into books. Your approach is a little different, and I want to celebrate it because not everybody does this. Jason, explain how you write. What do you do?
Well, I write everything analog first, and so I'm either using notebooks or my typewriters that I enjoy carrying around, and not electric typewriters because I don't want to have to be like looking for an outlet somewhere. You know, I use manual typewriters. I mean, really old school stuff. And a few years ago, I was working on a book, and I just had this moment of clarity where I was sitting here trying to type, and I said, "Man, what is going on? I'm either." One of two things is going to happen. One, I'm sitting down and I'm looking at the screen and the blank page staring back at me, and I'm like, well, I can't think of anything to write. I'm going to go click around on YouTube or Facebook and see if I can get some inspiration. And that's a lie that we tell ourselves because 3, 4 hours later, we're like, oh, well, yeah, I know a lot more about dog videos, but you know, I have not written anything on on my book. And so,
Right.
or the other thing is whenever I was in Word, and looking, typing things up, and those thinking like squiggly little lines that'll show up and
Right.
follow you around. And so I would get in this trap of spending, hours and hours of trying to rewrite these paragraphs or sentences and not get my story out. And so I said, man, I have to quit this. There's just too much distraction on these screens, and since then, it's interesting studies have come out, to show that like if you click away, even for a couple of minutes while you're working on something, that it takes you upwards of half an hour to get focused back on what you were doing. And so
Right.
I said, I gotta just cut this out altogether. And at least in that first initial draft where I'm trying to get my story out, get my ideas out, I like to sit in front of the typewriter. Like I was telling you, I mean the noise of it and the whole process of like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is much more satisfying than you would think. As part of that whole process, and it's not going to the typewriter's not going to sit there and tell me, oh, you misspelled veil, and
Yeah.
it doesn't care, and and so you could just type through, and I can get my ideas out on paper. I can get my story done, and out. And then when it's time for the editing, when it's time to start, cobbling things together and really leaning that editorial eye to things, then I'll type it up into the computer. And that's that part of the process for me. And so it does seem like an extra step, but creatively and even editorially, it is I think a huge help. And there's a huge benefit from that.
What do you do with all those typed up papers
Oh,
from when your book is published?
oh,
Do
I
you still hang on to them? What do you do with them?
well, yeah, they're in a
Okay.
storage bin in the shed. I mean,
Okay.
I have that, yes, and so several drafts of books, in storage for one day for the archaeologists to come dig.
There you go. Oh, yeah, the aliens. Somebody's coming for those. So you don't rewrite, you retype.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I like this. There's probably somebody listening to this, Jason, going, I would never have thought to write my book on a typewriter. But I do. I think there's like a dexterity thing. There's like a touching sounds, everything going on that you don't get with a laptop.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
right?
No, it is. It's a whole experience, and I'm like, wow, I can see why people loved this, and
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I like the lack of distraction too. I think a lot of people do get caught up in a cat video on TikTok while they're trying to write their book, and
Right.
then it's like 3 hours later, you're like, what have I done?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I like that it's a single focus for you, and you can just do that, and it's smart, and it travels too. You don't need any electricity. That's great.
Right. Absolutely. I
You're
do,
removing all of the excuses that people have for not to write their book.
right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have to carry around a stack of blank paper though, so
Yeah.
there is that in my backpack, but
Okay.
it's worth it.
I like it. Where do you like to write when you have time to write? Do you write at home? Do you go somewhere else to write?
Yeah, it depends. I do like
Yeah.
to write at home, and most of the typing and stuff like that, um I'll do at home, and my back little office here where
Yeah.
I can do it by myself because I don't want to be at the coffee shop or the cafe with the clack 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 and I'm not trying to draw attention or anything like that, but I do also enjoy writing at coffee shops and in public places and things like that, because it also speaking of being able to focus, it also really helps me with that. If you're in a cafe and then there's the noise and the chatter and all of that, being able having to block all that out and focus on what's in front of you, really helps. And really helps me to stay focused. And then when I need a break, I just look up and look around and see what's going on, and maybe overhear a tidbit of conversation that I'm like, oh, I'm going to work that in, and or see somebody interesting walk by and be like, oh, well, there's a new character. And so it is a source of inspiration from being writing out in the wild. But yeah, so it really depends.
And I guess if you did take the typewriter to a cafe, you'd have kids standing around with their iPhones taking videos of you going, look at this artifact. This guy is using a machine
Right.
to type. What is this thing?
Right. What even is that? Where do you plug it in? Yeah. Oh, you don't.
Look at this cool new iPhone thing he's got there. Yeah. I like it. I like it. Okay. So if you were listening to a podcast about writing and authorship from an author before you started your journey, what would have been helpful to hear now that you're at this stage in life as an author and as a writer? If you could rewind a little bit, go back, if you were able to listen to somebody like you now, what would have been a helpful thing to hear when you first started writing?
Well, I think a helpful thing that I did hear when I first started writing was actually from one of my college professors. And, looking back, this is something that I wish I would have taken seriously. And he told me this tidbit of advice, and he said that if you're going to be a writer, you have to be prepared and willing to write for the trash can. And at that time, I was like, absolutely not. Everything that I have written is gold and is going to be enshrined in a library somewhere at some point. And how can you even suggest that? But it's true. And it's something that I really wish that I would have paid attention to, because one of the things that I think has tripped me up in the past, and that I think that people could relate to, is that we tend to get an idea and then we want to just cling on to it. We want to hold on to it, even if it's not a great idea. And then so we could spend months, maybe even years, writing through this story, and then hit a wall with it or get done with it, and they're like, oh, that's really not as great as I thought it was. Or so being able to have that objectivity really as part of the writing process, to where you're writing out an idea and you're like, is this something worth like exploring, developing, or should I just put this aside and work on something else? And so that's something that I really, like I heard, but like I said, I really wish I would have paid attention to, because that would have saved me a lot of time and heartache, really.
Okay, that's good advice. I like that. Let's switch over to the readers, Jason. As a new reader comes into your world and finds you as an author, can you give us a little background? Like, how many books do you have? Kind of what are some of the things that you write about? What would a new reader find from you as an author?
Well, I like to say that I write weird fiction. And that's an old term from the pulp era that I really like, and so I've kind
Hmm.
of glommed onto it. And the weird fiction of that era, they were really like developing genres, and so there were no, there was sci-fi and there was fantasy, but all of this other stuff that we have, now all of these like different labels and things like that, um, really weren't around then. They were just writing what they thought were really cool stories. And, so that's really what I try to do. And so, yeah, most of my stories are speculative fiction, in the realms of sci-fi and fantasy. But I
Okay.
really like to, play around in those realms. And I really don't want to nail myself down to, oh, I only write cyberpunk
Right.
or high fantasy or whatever else it is. I really like exploring and creating new worlds and characters and ideas, and then putting my own little unique twist on things, and really trying to create these compelling and exciting worlds and characters. And that's kind of like where I like to start. And so like I said, I like to say that I write weird fiction.
Okay. Any common threads across the books that you write? Are they all standalone and they don't lean on other books that you write?
um well, I guess it depends. um there I do tend to write, you know in worlds that I create. So I'll write more than one book or story in a world or a setting that I've created.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily, all of the different books and stories that I've written aren't necessarily all connected. I don't have some kind of like magnum opus thing like Stephen King tried to do with his Dark Tower stuff, where everything is
Hmm.
the Dark Tower. That
Yeah.
that's not really where I'm at now. I don't know. Maybe in 20 years, I'll come back and say, yeah, no, actually, that was all wrong, and it's all connected. But here now, while I'm in it, no, I'm trying to explore the ideas. And one of the big ones that, big themes that I'm really all about, that I really like to explore, is the importance of story and narratives, and how that stories and narratives really shape and define, not only individual people, but reality and the world around us. And so the many different layers that are there between all the different types of stories, the personal stories that people tell themselves about who they are, and then the cultural stories about where people came from, and then the mythologies, and how all of that really influences and affects people and the world around us. That's one of the big things that I'm fascinated with.
Do you have any influences on you as an author? Other books, other authors you enjoy to read? That someone else listening and be like, oh, so it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that. Like I look at it from a music perspective if I'm trying to explain a band to
Sure.
somebody. Well, it's a little bit like this. It's like Def Leppard and Mariah Carey.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting mix. But it's kind of that. Like, do you have some kind of people that have really influenced you as an author that you kind of find works its way into your books?
Yes, two really stand out. Philip K. Dick,
Okay.
and Robert E. Howard. And so speaking of polar opposites, Philip K. Dick, I really love the way that he wrote, um, and how he explored the themes of reality and what it means to be human. And this is what he was writing about pretty extensively. And so and the fact that he took what science fiction from this high, lofty thing down to like the level of the common man, right? I mean,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
and so, traditional sci-fi in the 50s and stuff like that, well, they were talking about spaceship captains or, this or that, but that's what they were writing about. But Philip K. Dick really boiled that down, and he's like, no, my main character is a guy that makes jewelry. And and he's just trying to
Okay.
survive in this crazy world. And,
Yeah.
and so I really, so he really like brought it down and made it really relatable on a level like that. And so, that's one of the things that fascinates me, about him. And then Robert E. Howard, I mean, he was the creator of Conan. and Solomon Kane and the sword and sorcery genre itself. And so I mean, I just love his like passionate approach to writing. I mean, he was it's great, and there's just something in the way that he writes that really draws me in, and really brings his worlds to life that I think is wonderful.
When you're writing, Jason, how present is your audience for you as you're writing? Are you writing like a solitary, just you and the typewriter, and then the audience comes later, or are you thinking of the audience while you're writing each chapter?
Well, no, I mean, I'm thinking of the story that I want to tell, and how
Okay.
I see it is if I think this is a cool story, well, then other people out there are going to think it's a cool story too. I
Yeah.
mean, and so that's how I like to approach things. I think that like if you're writing for an audience too much, if you're trying to interconsider the audience too much, then that can really start to affect your writing in
Okay.
ways that it might not otherwise.
Okay. So, what about age range for your books? Do you have a kind of a target age range for your readers?
Usually I try to hit between 25 and 45
Okay.
is kind of the age range that I'm going for. But I mean, I have
Okay.
written books for younger audiences and things like that as well.
Okay. How many books do you have, Jason?
Right now, I have 9, and that doesn't seem
Okay.
like a lot,
Yeah.
but
I have had people on Jason, and their first book was a huge task, and they're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again.
oh,
So the fact that you have 9, that's a good sign.
oh, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
Because
So what was your first book, and when was that released?
my very first book was called The Saga of Seamus, and that was released in 2008, back in the halcyon days of self-publishing.
Okay.
And so that was a wild time. And that was actually one of the books that I wrote kind of for like a young adult audience. And so I kind of described this book as a fantasy adventure, but along the lines uh, of Gulliver's Travels. So, really heavy on the satire and
Okay.
that sort of stuff. And so that was the first book that I wrote, and then it's been a whirlwind ever since.
9 books later, how different do you approach your writing than you did on the first book?
Pretty differently.
Okay. All right.
Really differently. I've learned a lot more, and I think that that's really what it boils down to is not that you know my approach has changed and things like this, but I've learned the art of crafting books and telling stories in a much better way, where I can change the way that I approach the whole process, in a way that I think is better, much more direct. I mean, if we're not always striving to improve, then, what are we really doing? And so that's kind of how I've looked at it. And so, yeah, I mean, you asked about the what I do with all my old manuscripts. Most of the old manuscripts that I have in my storage container out in the shed are from my first book. I mean, my
Really?
other ones, progressively fewer as far as, the drafts and things like that go. But, that first one, oh man, it was all over the place. And, oh yeah. And so I've really learned and matured in the process, of it. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
Okay. I would love to see a picture of like a page from your first book all typed up and all that, or your handwritten scribbles on it, and see something like that on your social or something. I think it gives people the permission to build in public, right?
Right.
I think a lot of times when I talk to authors, they want to put their best thing out. They kind of do the whole Wizard of Oz, hide it behind a curtain, don't show you how it works, and here's my book. And it's like, well, I like kind of coming along with you and seeing you progress as an author, seeing you hit the wall, seeing how you overcome it, and take me on the journey of writing the book. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about authorship today is that you can build a community around yourself. You can do social media, you can do all these things, but you can actually bring people along. So it's not just you and the typewriter. You can actually, have an audience cheering you on while you're writing the book. It's just another approach that some of the authors I've had on, that's how they kind of leverage to keep them writing, keep them motivated to keep going, but also build in public. And I just thought that's kind of a unique premise, I think, as an author, to get out of the cabin, get away from solitude and kind of do this in front of an audience. What are your thoughts about that from an author perspective?
That's a really interesting idea. I really like that. Um, and I actually might start doing that. So thanks for the idea.
There you go.
But, but yeah, it's me personally, at first anyway, while I'm getting my ideas out and things, that is something that I like to keep to myself.
Yeah.
And so because it's just my little creation is just an embryo at that point.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that is something that I do like to protect and insulate and things while I'm working on that initial draft. But no, being posting some of my terrible handwriting or terribly typed pages, I mean, that would be fantastic, and yeah, you want to test yourself on just how good of a speller you really are. Use a typewriter.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, we've gotten real lazy with Microsoft Word.
There's no Control Alt Delete on a typewriter.
Right,
No, it doesn't come with that.
right,
Okay. Well, and then you can't lose your work either. You crash your computer. You can't crash a typewriter, really. So,
right.
yeah, I like it. It's good. It's a good perspective. Let's go to your most recent book then, Jason, for a listener, as a reader. What is your most recent book? Kind of give us an overview, because I want to get people in the door. I want them to come buy your books. But tell us your most recent book and kind of give us a big picture. What's it all about?
Okay, well, my most recent book is called Those Left Behind. And there's actual there's some interesting lore, speaking of typing it up and all of that type of stuff behind that, but the book itself is about this is my foray into, I guess, space westerns, because I always loved the idea of space westerns, and I thought that was really cool. And so I said, okay, this is kind of the world that I want to create. And so I created this setting, and this planet is called Quad, and it is one of, well, four now, colonies in this solar system. And a few thousand years ago, the creators of these colonies, they call them the pioneers, up and disappeared after this cataclysm, like wrecked this colony Quad, and just turned it into basically like a desert wasteland that's been slowly dying ever since. And so the survivors, the colonists, have spent 2,000 years surviving on this planet, and trying to figure out what's going on and what they're going to do. And so they've been on their own for so long that the idea of their pioneers has kind of passed into myth, and nobody believes they really existed anymore. And so where Those Left Behind starts is weird things start to happen again, and the stars aren't right, and the animals in the desert are acting weird, and things are starting to be strange, and and so the characters are going out and trying to figure out what is going on with with all of this weirdness, while at the same time trying to help these competing interests establish kind of a foothold, because there's all these different groups that are trying to figure out what the best way to keep Quad alive is, and to preserve this colony is. And so you have all these different groups with these competing ideas about what the best way to go about that is. And so the main characters are kind of stuck in the middle of the competing interests of these groups, at the same time, that all of the weirdness and things like that are going on around them. And so it's one of the to date my biggest project as far as like story that I have tried to undertake. And so it did take me a little bit longer than the other books to get this one done, just because the scope that I had was so massive that I had to boil it down and ultimately decide I'm going to turn it into a series instead. And so this will be really the first series that I have done. Most of my other books are standalone.
Being a quad, is there going to be 4 books in the series then?
That's my goal.
Oh, there you go. Add quad there. When you said space western, all I could think of is Steve Miller, I'm a space cowboy, right? I'm like, in my head, that song has been playing on loop since you mentioned space western. What I like about the idea of space western, it's futuristic and it's past at the same time. Like I'm thinking cowboys and horses, and well, that doesn't really exist in space, but I'm getting this feeling like they didn't have all the tools back in the West, back in the old days, but they have amazing tools in the future in space. Like there's like a dichotomy here going on, a fight between old and new as well. When I have the word space in my mind, I think of old westerns when I hear those two words together.
Right. Well, and that's kind of where the people of Quad are right now, because like I said, the pioneers left 2,000 years ago and they took all of their best technology with them. And so there's definitely been a loss of knowledge, over this time that has kind of de-evolved them back into a more primitive state, and so, while they do have things like, spaceships and stuff like that, they can't leave the solar system, and all of their robots are basically just mechanical automatons that, perform simple tasks, and things like this. And so, that's kind of where they're stuck. And so, I agree. The dichotomy of that, the space, the future, and the past is fascinating, and it was a really fun setting to create this story in.
Okay, what are you excited about for readers to find when they get a copy of this book?
I'm excited for readers to find the connection to the world and the characters, of course, but the exploration of the themes that I was talking about earlier. I'm excited for readers to find that out and to find out just exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about exploring these ideas, and how I like to go about doing it through the stories that I tell.
Is there a 2025 comparable context to what you write, where things that are happening today kind of shape it, and then you're changing the story to fit more of your story narrative?
No,
but kind of like things happening in the world today that kind of replicate what you're talking about?
I mean, to a degree, I think,
Okay.
but not so much. Now, with my first book, The Saga of Seamus, that was very much, like I said, like heavy on the Gulliver's Travels type of, satire. But I've kind of moved away from that and have really tried to start exploring like I said, the deeper themes and the broader themes, though there are a couple of things that people will be able to pick up on that, okay, this is what's going on in the world today, and see the parallels there. But I'm not trying to be very overt with all of that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Because we talked about the authors that influence you as a writer. I would think your location, being where you are, has an influence on you, even if it's something you don't think about at the front of your mind. Just where you live and what you see day to day somehow probably creeps its way into your writing. If I wrote here in Canada my perspective and what I know about geography and landscape where I live, seasons, all of that is in my brain, and it might show up in my writing just because I live here. So where you live, I can see some of that kind of making its way into your book, just organically showing up on the page as you type, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's kind of goes back to that you write what you know type of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean this is I mean this is New Mexico. There's a lot of enchantment and magic here. There's all sorts of beauty and things to go and explore, and so that definitely works its way into my writing, and the settings and stuff that I create, yeah, it is something that I kind of intentionally set like that. Some of my earlier books, like the Ruined Man books that I wrote, I actually set them, I set them in Albuquerque. And so, he's this paranormal detective running around Albuquerque, fighting demons and, solving mysteries and things like that. And then, the cyberpunk book that I wrote, Eve, yeah, I kicked it up the I-25 a little bit to Denver, but much the same, yeah,
Yeah.
and much the same. It's like, yeah, I've been to Denver quite a few times, so yeah, I think I can write about this. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it is important, um, I think, to try to experience uh, the different types of settings and things that you're going to write in. That way, you have an impression of it, and
Right.
you get that impression of things from actually being there or doing them. Right? I mean, I can write about the ocean because I've been there and I've seen it, and I have this impression that it left on me. But to write about it intimately, I don't know that I could do that.
Right.
Because I didn't grow up near it or on it or around it. I
Yeah.
see the ocean and I just reminded of how small that we all really are, and that it's this big thing that really doesn't care about me. And man, I'm going back to my mountains. And so yeah, that's
Yeah.
so yeah, to write like The Old Man in the Sea or something like that, I don't have the tools in my artist tool belt, I don't think, to do that unless I, moved somewhere for 6 months or a year and actually got a better impression of things.
When I was doing my research on you, Jason, getting ready for today, one thing I saw pop up was that you have been termed or given this title of the Imagination Wizard. And I'm like, that's an interesting title. I haven't had seen that before for somebody else. Why that title? Why would somebody classify you as an imagination wizard?
Because for a while I was talking about how writing and creating was a magical process,
Yeah.
and the you have to look at it as like magic, because you're actually creating something that out of nothing, something that was not here before. You are pulling something out of the void, out of the ether, and putting it in the world. And by doing that, you are affecting your immediate world and the world around you as well. I mean, so it very much is a a magical process in my mind, right? And kind of what it's about. And so yeah, so to be talking about that, and this, so you sound like an imagination wizard. Yeah, okay. That's what yes, that's what I am. I'm an imagination wizard. And
Okay.
and so, that's where that comes from.
So now when you go typing on your typewriter at the local coffee shop, you need like a little wizard hat and a little wand, right? And just be like pointing it at people and they'd be like, what is going on here? Who is this guy with a typewriter? What's he doing?
I'm creating art. It's part of my process. Leave me alone.
Stand too close to me. You're going to end up in my book, right? Yeah, I like this. It's good. Okay, so when you're planning out a series, you're saying this is something new for you as a writer. How do you approach a series? Do you kind of think about it in chunks? Are you writing it as a combined thing at one time? I'm just trying to figure out how do you do a 4-book series like that? That seems overwhelming for a non-author like me.
It is. It's overwhelming for an author like me. I didn't want to do this as far as because everybody's writing a series. Everybody got a series of
Yeah,
books, and
yeah,
so I said, okay, I really wanted to focus on novels that you didn't necessarily have to commit to buying six of or whatever.
yeah.
You could just be like, oh, this is cool. I want to read this, and oh, that was a cool read. I wonder if there's other ones. And so that's really the approach that I wanted to take. But this story, like I said, is so massive in my head that I already have it all outlined and mapped out.
Good.
But trying to distill all of those big ideas and
Yeah.
everything that was going on down into one book, it was not possible. And so so then I really had to sit down and be like, okay, so I have to break this down into parts. Then, this whole story, even though I know what's going to happen from the beginning to the end. I need to be able to tell the story, as part of that process. And so that's kind of how I'm doing it is just I'm treating it as really one really long book instead of, a standalone book. It's
Okay.
so I'm telling different parts of the same story
Okay.
throughout the next books. And so that's how I've had to approach it because, like I said, it was too much for me, and I didn't want to cut it out, or think, oh, I just won't, I won't worry about that part, or all of this. I said, no, it's all really cool. I really like this story, and so I have to do this in order to work it all in.
Okay. Where do you want to send people, Jason? I know you got to get back to typing. You got stuff to do. Where do you want to send people for that are listening to the show, and they want to follow your journey? They want to go back and get all 9 books, and stay with you into the future. Where do you want to send people? And I got a question I wanted to ask you as we wrap up. But where's the most likely place where you're going to show up and be able to talk to the listeners?
Okay, yeah, great. I am on Facebook. I have an author page that's
Good.
at Jason DeGray. I also have a reader group there, the Weird Worlds reading group. And I have I'm on LinkedIn and Substack as well.
Oh, good.
Instagram and X, I do have accounts there, but I'm just now starting to get back into all of that stuff. So not very active there yet, but there will be more to come on those platforms in the future.
Awesome. So my last question as we wrap up, Jason, as a writer and as an author, you have your kind of your main characters who kind of carry the weight of the load of the story. As you write, have you had secondary kind of background characters kind of step forward to you and want to be more in the story, and they've kind of raised their hand saying, I want to be more than just a background character? Has that kind of happened for you as an author?
No,
It hasn't happened. Interesting.
no, yeah. The characters drive the story, right? And
Okay.
so in my mind, in my writing and process, that's what's at the forefront of my mind. Secondary characters are there to help the characters themselves, the main characters themselves, drive the story, and so they each have a role to play. I don't necessarily think they're any less important than the main characters. In some instances, they are just as important or more important, right? Because how could this character get there without this happening here first, and
Right.
that sort of thing. So that is. That's how I look at it, but I have a definite idea of the story that I want to tell and the characters that I want to use to tell that story. And so if while I'm in the brainstorming process, I'll do that with character creation and things like that, and how that's how that works. Pick and choose how I want to create this character, and pick aspects and things like that to put them together. But once that is set, those are my people, and those are the people that I'm telling the story through.
Excellent. Because when I see like a TV or a movie or even books, there'll be spin-offs where it's like the main story is about these characters and their story, and there's this adjacent character that just kind of seems to be like the annoying little brother who just keeps showing up and be like, okay, we're going to pay attention to you in a minute, right? But then they end up becoming their own character and becoming their own story. And then it becomes a future project or something where it's like, I really don't have time to invest in you and develop you as a character, but there's something about this character that just keeps showing up that I feel like I need to honor them with their own story.
Oh yeah, okay, I know, I get that, and so is with those left behind in this series that I'm working on. I mean, that's definitely going to happen with secondary characters and stuff in the first book. They're going to gain more importance and things like that in later books. But again, that was always my plan.
Okay, good. See, that's as a reader, we don't understand how any of this works. We just love a great story. We love a great author. And we love falling in love with an author with more than one book for us to consume. So having you on here, Jason, is great. I'm sure our listeners are going to love falling in love with all of your books as well.
Well, thank you, Dave. I had a great time.
Excellent. You got to keep me in mind. You got to come back as new books come up and new projects we can talk about in the future. Love to have you back and continue the conversation, Jason.
Oh, thank you. I would be happy to do that.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information for Jason, all of his books, everything you need in the show notes as always. And as we do here on the show, I'm reminding all the readers, as you go out and buy Jason's books, not if, but when you buy Jason's books, you leave a great review. Jason's going to love to hear your thoughts, hear your comments, your feedback around the story, the book, everything. That's really going to help him as an author to be encouraged to keep writing and also to share your thoughts with him directly through your reviews. So please, every book you buy from these amazing authors, leave a great review. I'm sure they really appreciate it. Jason, again, thank you so much for making time for me.
Hey, thank you, Dave. I really enjoy it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes, so finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.